Hello, friends. Today we are going to be diving into one of the most pressing topics in the event industry, and that is sustainability. How can event planners minimize the environment footprint while also delivering impactful experiences? And our guest today is an expert in sustainable event practices and is here to share actionable insights and strategies to help you plan greener and more responsible events.
Welcome to the Events Demystified podcast, where we demystify the world of in-person, virtual, and hybrid events, AV production, and AI technology by sharing practical tips, tricks, and strategies to help your event succeed. This podcast is brought to you by Treefan Events, a woman-owned boutique event production agency that caters to event professionals, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. We specialize in AV and AI education, integration, automation, and implementation, all based on our Fit for Events framework, which focuses on futuristic AV production, innovative AI technology, thriving audiences, and empowering behind-the-scenes teams. And I'm your host, Anka Platon Treefan, with over 2 decades of hands-on experience in event production, event management, and now AI technologies and cybersecurity.
Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Events Demystified podcast. I am your host, Anka Platon Treefan, and today I am super thrilled to welcome my special guest, Alycia Drube, to share her insights on sustainability in the event industry and how planners can embrace eco-friendly practices and strategies without sacrificing quality. Our guest today, Alycia, is the founder of Positive Impact Event Consulting, a business coaching and consulting company that focuses on empowering small and medium-sized event businesses to transition toward more sustainable practices. Alycia is a certified sustainable event professional through the Event Industry Consult program and offers group courses and personalized consulting, open source videos to make sustainable solutions accessible across the industry. With a background in entrepreneurship and small business management, Alycia brings a deep passion for events and a vision for a future where planners lead their teams and clients towards a more manageable, sustainable future. She's here to share actionable tips and proven strategies to help us all create events that are impactful, memorable, and environmentally responsible. And with that, let's bring our guest in. Alycia, welcome to the show.
Hi, Anka. I'm so excited you invited me.
Well, you're very welcome. And to start us off, I would love to start with a nice breaker. Let's just say, what's one memorable event that you've attended or maybe you've planned that really showcase exemplary sustainable practices that when you think about, you're like, that is the type of event I wish every event was more like?
Oh, that's actually a really hard one because it's not very common yet. But I love to see anytime I'm at an event where they disclose what they're doing, even if it's small, that's labeled trash or signs that say that they're doing sorting or how to handle something, always feels good that they're putting thought toward it as opposed to nothing, because that's very common. Not to immediately throw us under the bus, but I'm based up in Seattle, Washington, where you would think politically we're very in line with sustainability, and it's not super common that you see it very heavily featured in events. One of the great things we do have is a lot of reusable programs here. So going to the farmer's market or a local street festival, you can go into the beer gardens and get reusable cups that then go into the recycle program and they get washed and reused. And that's always great. And it's a great way for companies to advertise and be seen as supporting that. And they're fun little plastic cups that they're different than you would have otherwise have.
Well, to the initial question, if you think about it, probably that is the reason why you decided that it is time for someone to start some type of consultancy support system for all the events at large that do want to integrate sustainable practices into their events. But as we were talking just prior to actually pressing record, what is wanted and what is needed and what is done happen to be three different things.
Yeah.
And I love that you really placed yourself into this niche and you've done a lot of research, a lot of education, and then you really bring the foundational elements to event professionals through education, through your podcast, which I want to hear more about because you just launched it recently, as well as different actionable tips in which event professionals can figure out what is their marketing strategy, how does that align with the overall brand and the value that it brings. Anything that you can add to this as far as what can event professionals do to integrate their sustainability desires into the overall event strategy?
Yeah, exactly like you're saying, I started from personal interest. I went to do the Sustainable Event Professional program just from my own internal discomfort at seeing things not being done. And once I had it, I thought like, okay, have to share the information I've collected because it's important and I feel up to being that person. And the biggest takeaway from my perspective, especially since I focus on small and medium-sized businesses, so people who can't simply hire a new person onto the team who specializes in this and just recruit someone, is to bring it into your procedures as early as possible. All the planners, all the vendors that we know, we all see the problems that happen when you ask for something too late in the game. And to think of sustainability as an afterthought is going to continue to push it onto the back burner. So if you can just pick the one thing that you as a business or personally care about, the thing that will reflect the most closely with your values and your mission and your marketing now, and just add that to every procedure you have as a question. Every vendor, ask them. If the example I always like to use is, we're here in the great nature state of Washington. If you love going kayaking in the local nature preserve, then maybe the thing that you care the most about today is water conservation. So start asking every vendor, do you bring your own water? What do you do about water conservation? Ask every venue, put it on every to-do list to consider, is there a way that we can conserve water more with this element that I'm working on? And so just having it on as early in the process as possible means that you won't later have to do 10 extra hours of lifting to reverse engineer a better outcome.
I totally agree. I actually, as you were talking about water conservation efforts and what companies can do or vendors, partners, I remember I was on site at an event. I was working the event on the production side, and they were big from a marketing point of view on sustainability practices, and
Mm,
they talked about it like in great detail on their messaging, their branding, their marketing, all of it. And then on the same token, here comes this huge truck delivering all of these water bottles, stacks and stacks and stacks of water bottles for the attendees, for the crew, for everyone involved. And we're like, there's like such a disconnect right now
exactly.
between your messaging, your efforts, and then what are those water bottles doing here, like plastic water bottles? Could there have been a better way to support this event with maybe refillable waters, or bring your own water, or here's all these other options that could have been implemented? And it was such a disconnect, and we were just kind of like, well, thank you for the water, disconnect to what
Yeah,
the messaging is.
exactly. Well, and that's where communication, not marketing communication, but internal communication becomes super, super important. The very first thing, as you're thinking about this for yourself and your company or your coworkers, even if you're not in charge of your company, if it's just your department or whatever, going out and talking with everyone around you and get the message out there. This is something we care about as a company. This is something we're working on, and let it be collaborative. You don't have to like sneakily in the back say like, okay, we really care about water conservation, but we don't want to bother anyone with that. We're just going to try to do it on our own. No, that's so silly. If you can go to your caterers and your venue and any of your deliverables and say to them, hey, this is something I really care about. I would love your support. Can we facilitate each other? What are you trying to work on? How can I facilitate that for you? And I think with big companies like that who are trying to put out this big message, that's where we get into greenwashing territory. Can you actually back up what you're saying? Do you have literacy in this topic to actually talk about it? And if you instead say, I'm not going to go out and blast everything sustainability, I'm not going to change my brand to talking only about sustainable efforts and then have the reality of what shows up and my actions not match that. Instead, just share what you are doing, share what
Yeah.
you are learning, talk about what's happening and what your goals are. And we are so far away from where we want to be with sustainability and the outcomes that would be making the kind of effort we envision in our big dreams, that even if someone comes back and says, oh, you're caring about water conservation, well, what about waste? Well, what about energy? You can say, we're doing what we can do well now, and that's on the big picture plan, but I don't want to take on too much too fast. And that's perfectly reasonable to say. And that is something that your audience, if they can't handle that, then you need to go back and look more at the education and how you can be communicating that way through education rather than through shiny flashing letters about what you're doing. Because one of the big tenets of sustainability is education and sharing what you're doing, because if we're not able to raise the standards of everyone and what they expect, then they won't see how much better it is that we're making these choices.
Totally. I think a few of the things that I heard you say is transparency is key. Whenever you're communicating those sustainability initiatives, you have to let everyone involved know what you're trying to accomplish. And I think a lot of companies are definitely keen to highlight a lot of their efforts towards it, but it's also very hard to measure. And I think we're going to get into measurement soon. But as you're looking at who you're sourcing, right, and the options that you have, I just recently had a conversation internally with our team as we were looking at sourcing local vendors, because within that even plays with our overall strategy for sustainability, right? Where we can implement, it might not be zero waste policies, but close to zero waste
Yeah.
policy to offset some of the carbon emissions just from trucking equipment and a lot of other things around from this place to that place, when locally there's a plethora of other vendors that you could source, but also support the local economy. If you're going to do an event into this one destination, then look around what else is there. Yes, I understand you have certain preferred vendors and you certain active vendors and you want to include them, but why not open up the Rolodex of partnerships and vendors across, say, the places where you do events, and in advance be able to source, because that will play then in your sustainability efforts as well. And one of the ways in which I feel like there's so many other different practices that event planners and marketers can communicate their eco-friendly practices. It could be just engaging the stakeholders, their suppliers, the attendees. Any other ways that you can think of when it comes to the sustainability efforts that companies happen to have or events have?
Yeah, and that's a great point that the companies might have. Go through and see what are you already doing that you don't think of or take credit as a sustainability effort,
Mm.
and at least internally, if not externally, highlight that for yourself, that you already have Energy Star appliances in your office. You already have a power down policy to turn off all your computers at night. You already source from certain local businesses or minority owned businesses. Like you can already take account of the things that you're doing. both to feel like, okay, I'm not starting from scratch. I'm not at zero. I do things. I already have some of this under control. And to be able to say, like, okay, skipping water bottles is not the only thing I have to share with my stakeholders, that we're making progress. And then one of the visuals that I really like to help people feel more empowered and to feel like, even if you're backed into a corner and you're like, okay, it's too late or the budget doesn't account for it, where else can I look for ways to push our sustainability versus last year? Is the sustainable umbrella. The way that I love that they approached it from the Events Industry Council board, who created Sustainable Event Professional certification, is to look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals. There's 17 of these goals, and the whole point of them is from the UN is to say, if we are, as humanity on planet Earth, going to persist, if we are going to sustain the human race through time, what are the things we need to do in order for that to happen? We need the environment to be safe and for there not to be mega storms and droughts and heat waves, all of those environmental things. But we also need to pay people fair wages and eliminate slavery and human trafficking. And we need to make sure people have access to clean water and clean air. And we need to make sure people are able to afford their life and live in the communities that they want to be living in. And so from that umbrella, I break it down into 4 pillars. And I always visualize it like little knobs. You have 4 little knobs to work with. When you run out of the environmental knob, you can look at community and social and say, how can I support the local community? How can I support minorities? How can I make sure that all of the different religious communities feel that they have access to my event? How can I make sure that vegetarians have access, people with different disabilities and accessibilities, bringing in all of that sort of DEI or idea, the
Social
inclusivity.
responsibility.
Exactly. We see CSR pops up a lot. That's all coming community and social. And then you have economic, which is, if my business folds because I tried to do this, then that's not economically sustainable. If my community can't afford to keep doing this street fair, then that's not economically sustainable. So looking at how can we source local and keep money in the local community? How can I fund businesses who are doing better and doing more that align with our mutual values, rather than cut costs and ship from China or etc. There's lots of different ways that you can cut costs, and it leaves someone who's doing a better job without that income and without that financial support. And then the 4th little column is personal health and well-being. So how can I make sure that I live through the experience? I think 100% of us who listen to this podcast have been like doing the math in our notebook of like, is this burnout? Am I at the edge right now? Am I killing myself by doing 18-hour days with 50,000 steps? How many days a month can I do that before I'm at my ragged edge? Considering that for your team, considering that for your attendees and your stakeholders and your vendor partners. Is everyone having time to do what they need, having space to get their workout in so that their body is prepared? Do we have water for the staff in addition to the attendees? Like, there's so many ways. So as soon as you're hitting a wall and saying, okay, that's all we can afford to do in waste reduction and sorting and in water availability and fancier food from more local sources and all the things for environmental, can you say like, okay, let's look at our messaging. It doesn't cost to look at our messaging and make sure that it's inclusive. Can we look at accessibility and make sure all of our vendors know? We're not going to ask who needs what type of accessibility accommodations. We're just going to make sure this is accessible regardless of who shows up. And those are things that are going to cost less, or not necessarily cost in dollars, but just a little bit of change of focus. And that way, when you've tapped out the budget on things that cost more, you can still say, when I've got these 2 contracts to choose from, I'm going to choose the minority-owned business who supports local charities instead of the generic. And that way I can say we've made a more sustainable economic choice.
100%. So much to unpack there, but I love every single thing that you just said there. And it ties so much into this other conversation I was having. We were looking at some production partners, and I was sharing with my stakeholders how important it is to me to include social responsibility part of our sustainability practices. So that, like you said, when you have two different production companies, I'm looking beyond just the gear and beyond just what the services they can provide. I'm looking at who they employ. I'm looking at what kind of conditions they offer to their employees, to their event technicians, to everyone that's behind the scenes. Because when you put side by side, they might look the same, but then you might see that this one company, all they hire is white dudes to be working behind the scenes in AV production roles, whereas this other company is trying really hard to be diversify and inclusive and include people of color and include more females and more women in lead roles. And to me, that's important. Like, to me, we're not talking about the same. Like, you might have the same gear, you might have the same service offering, you might have the same level of customer service, but if you are doing this bit more when it comes to social responsibility, then you're my choice for sure. And going to the attendee engagement, because you just alluded to a little bit, I feel like attendees, they really want to be part of the solution. And I've seen this, especially at IMAX and Connect, has been putting a lot of effort behind put teeth behind their desires, right? Like, they started practicing what they're saying, and attendees were playing along. They really wanted to be part of the solution. Are there some strategies that you've seen that you'd recommend to keep attendees engaged, especially when it comes to sustainability and eco consciousness for the events that we plan?
Yeah, I think that is really good message that a lot of people need to hear. People do care. They do want to see this stuff. And how many times are we attending and come up with a piece of trash and go like, where is this meant to go? I feel bad that I only see one trash can, but oh well, like there's no alternative. And just even ourselves knowing the solutions and knowing like there might be a better option, but I don't see it, so I don't know what else to do. It really puts us in that position. And I always say I'm a Captain Planet millennial. I grew up absolutely through the 90s, like environmentalism, care about recycling, care about your waste. And so there's so many of us out there that like this is in the back of our minds, giving us stress, making us feel not good about everything all the time. And obviously, with like so many things with events, one of the biggest things is communication. If you can preemptively answer people's questions, they will appreciate that. Having the knowledge by the time they're looking for the answer is really important for attendees. But also going through that, taking your sustainability all the way back to the experiential design and having that included for that team to consider so that your attendees are being answered every step of the way. And it's not like, oh, we just threw out some recycle bins because we realized we have recyclable materials on site. Instead, be going through that step by step so that they're having that as part of their physical experience the whole time. It's always making sense. It's always integrated. Dog, you gotta go lay down. Come on. Quit moving, you weirdo. She never even stands up, and today she is like trying to go on the wrong side of my chair. Come on, come on, come on.
Well, you got to introduce your co-host for the podcast.
That's true.
Great segue.
The great segue. Oh my gosh.
So I wanted to mention something. Have you seen the latest Netflix documentary? It's called Buy Now, The Shopping Conspiracy.
I've seen that it's out, and I haven't brought myself to watch it yet.
Definitely eye-opening, especially when you think about not just the fashion industry and its environment impact, but
Yeah.
also looking beyond at, as you mentioned, we want to make sure that we do our part and we recycle, and this thing goes in this bin and this thing goes in that bin. But then the big disconnect that was revealed, especially in this documentary, was what happens to the other side. You think that all of this, now that you've done your part, has a plan and there is some kind of a strategy that once that recycle bin goes to the destination, there is a bigger plan that's implemented, only to find out, and this was like so eye-opening to realize that actually a lot of the same thing that you think you did your part, you recycled, has absolutely no connection to what happens on the other end. And it will end up in the same landfill. It will end up destroying the environment in many different ways, because what is done here, the messaging, the marketing, let's all be sustainable and do our part, is not always connected to the actual overall actionable steps. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of that applies to our events as well. We might be able to say, yes, we recycle, we have the food wasting program in place, and we provide water refillable stations, and we make sure that our partners are eco conscious and their gear doesn't consume a lot of power and wattage, and all of those little things that we try to check mark. But then when the reality meets the actual, there isn't necessarily a lot that you can look at and say, well, tell me, how did we impact? What was the data? What is the ROI? What is, so I think it has to go to not just the way we strategize about sustainable practices, but how do we make those real time, real life adjustments during our events, for our events, to make sure that not only do we enhance the attendee experience, because we don't want to overwhelm everyone, but also our sustainable practices, our sustainable efforts. So I'm wondering, is there a way in which those two parts can be connected in a cohesive way?
Yeah, this is where the big goal of not letting yourself get overwhelmed to the point that you don't do anything is my biggest concern.
Yeah.
Every single business owner that I talk to before opening the consulting office, the reason they don't do things now is because of the overwhelm, because they say, okay, we can do this solution, but that means more trucking. And if we get rentals, that mean they have to wash the dishes. And then if washing, is that better or worse? And it all, people escalate so quickly. And it's
Yeah, because they're like, well, what else can I do? Like, it feels like my effort is like one little drop in this ocean, and will it
right,
really matter, right? So,
right.
what would make that effort matter? Like, you won't be able to change the tide, but if individually you can make a change, what would be your advice? Where would you start?
Yeah, I think starting by talking about it and having a plan, and it's kind of a crazy thing to say, but like let go of that idea that this is such a tiny drop in the ocean, because we're already an event that's, or an industry that's invisible. Events pop up and then they go away, and it's like they were never there visually, like to the economy and to businesses and to the physical space. But we bring a lot of people into small spaces for short periods of time and have big impact. So it actually is, your business has a bigger impact than like your home. And unfortunately, all the big corporations who make plastic products and are trying to sell you more and support the overconsumerism, I'm sure that's what that documentary was all talking about, is that, oh, they're saying that now their packaging has less plastic, so you can buy it more confidently. It's still made of plastic, and now it's thinner plastic that becomes microplastics faster. So reduction is better than this improvement. Rather than looking for a solution to this problem, try to just avoid the problem, get away. And so anytime you can reduce your negative impact rather than shift it is going to be a big solution. So if we can just not have bottles and instead have refill stations, if we can have reusables instead of trying to figure out where to send our waste, then we're going to be moving that way faster. And it's all about getting people accustomed to this being the new standard of behavior. And this is where events themselves are this environment where we're creating expectations, and event planners and stakeholders are really leaders in that space. The experience that we design is leading the attendees into something. So we can create an environment that changes their expectations. And then when it's fulfilled and they feel like, oh, that was amazing. I didn't receive any little pieces of plastic. I didn't have to find a trash can for anything that I was handed. Then people will take that away and go like, oh, well, I've been to an event where I didn't have to throw away anything after. There
The
wasn't
swag that
trash piling up. There wasn't these junky pieces of plastic swag that broke as soon as I handed them to my children because I didn't even want them. All of that stuff, getting that reduction and getting that experiential expectation raised is going to be really helpful. And then in terms of seeing your progress, you need to see it. And so one of the really great things that I find empowering about getting started in sustainability and feeling like, okay, I'm going to tap into the one thing I really care about because I had the energy for that. We talked before we started about the people who are put in this position but maybe don't have the energy for it, or it's been put on their plate by the corporation who hired them to plan, but they don't really know and they don't necessarily care about that element. Is pick the one thing and then start taking measurements. You need a baseline to know whether you're improving. So this year, rather than worrying about this version of this event being how many pounds of waste you diverted or whatever, start measuring your waste. How many pounds of trash were there? How many bags of trash versus how many bags of recycling? Like, you're going to have to make a plan of how to get that information. You're going to have to ask your vendors questions they might not want to answer, but you can start having that conversation. Hey, I'm not asking you to change anything this year, but would you just let me know how many miles did you drive to get here and back? How many staff members did you bring? Start measuring for these things. And then next year you can say, hey, everybody, we had 6 bags of recycling last year. That's great. We also had 20 bags of trash. I don't love that. How can I support you in all of your shipping and all of your movement on site to have packaging that is going to be less waste intensive? Can we work out a deal so that you have the facilities to bring things in that's not just wrapped in plastic and plastic and plastic and plastic? What can we do to make that happen? And if they're like, nothing, that's crazy, you're asking for something crazy, then you've got to continue that conversation and say, like, what's not crazy to you? How can we make this something that will work? And if they're like, we're amazing and only hire white guys and we insist on wrapping everything we own in plastic and then throwing it away when we arrive into your trash, then you go, okay, there's probably someone else who hires a big team of multicolored LGBTQ plus and female excited people who are super stoked at, like, okay, if we can charge you X amount more for the next 2-year contracts, then we can afford to invest in Pelican cases. And how cool would that be for us? And then they have that in the future for everyone they're offering. It's all about, we're a collaborative industry. And as soon as we try to do things non-collaboratively, it's just like hitting a brick wall.
I think
So,
what stood the most there
oh,
to me is creating this emotional connection, right? Like you
yeah,
create an emotional connection with your attendees, with your stakeholders that can really then amplify your intentions and your desires, but as well as the event's impact. And same way how storytelling can really transform any data measurement, and especially even within the sustainability department section, it can take it from this set of policies that we want to implement into something that is more personal and more relatable of an experience, where you can maybe share some narratives that can highlight, as we alluded earlier, to the local people, to how we improve economy, to processes, to the purpose behind why are we trying to do this, like how, say, local farmers can really contribute to the menu, and how recyclable materials were repurposed in one way or another in some fashion. And all of that goes to this emotional connection that now I this is why I'm doing this, and this is why it matters. And hopefully that will also impact you in a way that will make you want to contribute. Any other way in which you feel like maybe storytelling can really be used to communicate sustainable practices and brand values more efficiently and effectively before even you get on event side?
Absolutely. The amazing thing about the sustainability umbrella is this is all stories that we care about. This is not profit margins. This is supporting, like everything you just said, supporting the economy, supporting people's health, supporting the environment. So this is a great opportunity to be able to talk about your event in this forward-looking way. If you are going to be donating all of your centerpieces to a local senior home
Yeah.
after your event, go beforehand, have some video on site, meet some of the people that are going to be receiving that, and you can put that in your marketing. Not only have you contributed through this gala to an amazing organization that supports disability rights, you also are facilitating all of these people getting a beautiful environment for a few days when they receive all of our table decor. It's a matter of telling the truth and letting everyone see the reality of the effort you're putting in. Because on our side, it can get very like, oh, this is so many things. Like I'm making my list so much longer. But these are things that people do care about, that I care about, that you care about, your kids care about. So just being able to say what the plan is, and my big hope and dream and vision, and I know that it will come to fruition, is that the more your attendees and your stakeholders are hearing these stories right now on TV, on like Hulu ads or whatever, it's the local Subaru brand talking about how they donate a percent of their profits to the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So Make-A-Wish is doing a video about this one Subaru company or lot dealership has funded 10 Make-A-Wish projects. And my favorite one was the girl who asked for a garden. And that's the Subaru company marketing to us by telling the truth. This is a thing our owners cared about, and we started giving money toward, and it was working. And this is the outcome. It has a real outcome. And even if it's like, oh, we're asking you to know which trash can to put your trash in. Oh, what a pain. You can say, like, all of this compost is not going to a commercial composter. It's going to the pig farm up the road, and look how cute the pigs are. Like, you can make every part of it feel like it's engaging locally. Like, you can have in your program the pictures of the business owners who have supported in weird places that you wouldn't otherwise be like taking the time to clean certain things. So you brought in special cleaners. It's so open to actually sharing what's going on. And from a business perspective and a marketing perspective, it's about getting credit for the things you're actually doing. Because, like I said, economic bottom line, as a business, we need to be getting that credit for the heavy lifting we're putting in. This is hard work. And if we're going out of our way to do something and our vendor partners don't know that's our specialty, they don't know how accessible our business is or how great our hiring policies are, then we're doing that effort and not balancing the economic scales. So I know people sometimes get like, oh, well, I just donate to good causes because it's good. Like, your business is allowed to talk about how that's a thing you do. And if you need to separate it as my business says Alycia donates to 1% for the planet, then you can separate it and say, this is the business saying that we do it. And Alycia doesn't really have to talk about it. Alycia can feel like, oh, I know, I just care about the things I care about. I just love the animals. And even if it's having the kind of policies that like major corporations take credit all the time. We give our employees 3 hours a month to go volunteer at their local preferred volunteering opportunities. Like, that's not a very cool thing to say that you're doing if you're Amazon. Like, give more money to the places that need money, you have it. But if you're a tiny company and you say like, yeah, we do half days on Fridays to walk dogs at the animal shelter, frickin' tell everyone. That's, worth sharing, because your business is actively investing in that. That's your real
Mm-hmm.
bottom line going toward that cause. And it's the same thing for all of your behind the scenes effort for your event. If you're spending 6 months working on something, you should, in theory, have 6 months worth of positive effort you're putting into the process in the community to talk about within your marketing. And the more you do that, the more your attendees expect to go, oh, well, last year they were talking all about how they were donating to puppies. I wonder what they're donating to this year. I wonder if the puppies have grown up. Like, you're creating this expectation with the story for them to engage and feel like, if everyone I donate to isn't going above and beyond and doing these extra things, like, why do I keep with them when these guys are doing amazing?
So definitely share those narratives then to highlight the people, the processes, the purpose behind everything that you're doing. And then as we move into a bit of a data talk, then data can provide the actionable insights that are needed to then fine tune some of those sustainable practices. And when
Yeah.
I think of events and when I think the kind of metrics that you already mentioned that planners can collect, right? That can be attendee travel emissions and energy usage and waste management outcomes, because that can identify some opportunities for improvement. And then there's also real-time data that comes from venues, like their energy consumption, that can also be used to make some adjustments on the fly, maybe like dim the lights or turn off the lights, or does the AC have to be so freaking high while we're doing this event? Or maybe you can reconfigure some resource allocations and then post event, as you highlighted, then compile these insights into some kind of a report, so that sustainability impact report that can demonstrate your accountability, but also set some kind of a benchmark, right, for your future improvements. All of that fabulous. Now, when it comes to measuring ROI, because that can be a challenge, especially when you factor in sustainability, have you found any best ways to measure it? I know that there's some calculators out there running on, like carbon calculators for waste diversions or for food carbon footprint, or anything, any tools that you came across that would be useful to highlight so that people feel like more empowered to measure some of the ROI that comes with their efforts.
Yeah, unfortunately, ROI is really hard to capture, especially from like the attendee engagement side, things like that. But my preference, like my personal favorite way, is to front load your ROI. So if we can spend less initially, then we're automatically doing better. So if we're going to say, as an organization going forward, the policy is to not overbuy food. We're
Mm.
done with that. I know we have an old view of it being a luxury experience for our attendees. We're done with that. It's over. We're reducing the number of hours that you have to get access to the food, and we're reducing the amount of food we're going to buy by 30%. Like, we're really going. Then you're automatically both pulling money out that can go towards something else and improving your overall ROI. And everything else needs to be focused on the things that you can control, because I feel like this is an environment where there's so much that's not going to be in our control. We can ask our vendors to do things, and then we can ask them again when it looks like they're not doing it, but we can't really control what they're doing. We can't control attendees and whether they bring in their own trash to throw in our trash cans, but we can look at these things in advance and say, hey, we need to be able to invest in this positive action and either counterbalance it with a different outcome that's going to be a benefit, or reduce the cost in other areas. And I think it's all about investing in the things that the return is as palpable as possible. So either as a business, you're going like, this is great cash, like this is money I feel good about, or it's like, it's undoubtedly good that we're doing this thing. And sometimes it's as easy as like reduce your own energy cost in your own off, because we're not all on site all the time. Our own office practices, our own home practices, if we all have a home office to write off, like we can be managing those things all the time. And that gives our business an ROI as on top of every individual event that is taking the sustainability into account.
Absolutely.
I hope
And
that was
to, yeah,
specific.
definitely. And what you just said earlier as well, with giving yourself a pat on the back for some of the things that you're already doing. And when you think about sustainable practices, they don't always have to be that expensive, and
Right.
just encouragement in the right direction. Like we talked about, bring your own water bottle, maybe partnering with local vendors, even that use digital platforms for communication instead of like printed materials. I can't tell you how many events I've gone to. And I was a speaker, and they had this pamphlet, this beautiful magazine, and I see my name in 3 different locations that they misspell my name, like 3 different ways. And I'm
Oh,
like, I go to the event planner, and I'm like, my name is misspelled in 3 different locations in 3 different ways. Now I'm like, I could have insisted that it was correct, but I'm thinking, this is such a waste. Like, I don't want you to reprint your programs, and I don't want you to do this. But why do you even have a program in the first place? Like, this could have been a digital app, this could have been a website landing page, like with a speaker highlight. And that is so much easier to change and update
yeah.
versus now you're going to have to go back and reprint a bunch of those programs. And that's a lot of waste, because what are you going to do with this printed materials now, right? And reusable signage, that's and decorations, that also plays into this reduce waste while also saving money for future events. And there's so much out there. I was having a conversation with a larger company, a large brand, and I was asking them, so when you guys go to these trade shows, like what do you do with a lot of the trade show booths and the build-ups and all the things that go into that particular event? Are they getting reused? Are they being recycled? Like, what is the plan? And it was so surprising to me to hear, like, talking about like Amazon being a large corporation, right, that has the funds, the money, and the could really make an impact more than a smaller business might. And they're like, yeah, it's too difficult for us to save or recycle, so we just throw it away and then we start all over again. And I'm like, what a lost opportunity right there. So if you're a small business and you're already doing your part, pat yourself on the back, because you might be looking at it as, I'm doing something small, but guess what? You're still making an impact, and there's still a momentum that can be built towards bigger initiatives over time. So keep doing what you're doing, keep measuring, and be encouraged that it doesn't go to waste. Now, as we think about some other ways and approaches to reduce waste at events, especially when it comes to food, materials, giveaways, any other approaches, innovative approaches that you can recommend or you came across that you thought, oh, that's actually a smart way to do things, or anything that could be useful for our audience?
I think one of the best messages I can leave you with is to lean on your vendors for their expertise. So some of the most amazing signage solutions that I've seen for reusable signage or recyclable signage is because the printer was given free reign to know what the best printing materials are and to think of an innovative solution with their laser cutter so that pieces could like puzzle piece together so they could flatten for shipping. Like if you have good, strong partnerships and you trust your vendors, then you have the ability to get these solutions from the creative minds who are thinking about it all the time. When you need to reduce your energy usage, ask your AV people, hey, I've heard about shutdown procedures. What's your thought on getting everything dark overnight? How much energy can we pull off the grid overnight, because there's no point in sitting with everything turned on, and let them take time to be like, oh, okay, here's some good solutions, here's the best way for my team to go about that, these are the items that need to stay on for whatever reason, and these are the items that don't. Maybe we'll have them on the same power strip so we can just hit the switch. Like as you lean on your caterers to lean on their farmers, like just like I said before, this is all collaborative. And if we don't trust people in their expertise, we aren't going to get these creative solutions. So that's where, like, I love the idea that I can go to my caterers and say, okay, I know you have some great local sources. We're in an amazing agricultural region. I would rather this menu be open-ended, and the week before you work with your farmers on an order that's fresh and in season and actually ready, then we say it's got to be green beans, even if they're like gross and not ready to be picked, or we have to ship them in from Argentina at the last minute because they weren't actually ripe. And that's a matter of trusting them to have their team that they work with and their solutions. And if the farmer is like, but I actually have this amazing fruit for your dessert, let them go for it. Let people use their expertise and their creativity. And that's where this whole messaging of making sure it's touching into the things that people care about, and making sure your vendors know why you're doing it, and making sure that if they have something they care about, you can support them in that. Like, we are all passionate people who started these businesses because we love doing this and because it's impactful. Events are super impactful. And if we can start having a positive impact instead of not realizing these hidden negative impacts, we're all going to feel like so powerful. And so my favorite solutions are from the creative minds who think about it 24 hours a day.
I love it. Now, as we come to a close here and we're thinking about any last thoughts or any last encouragement or anything that you like our audience to be left with, what comes to mind?
Let yourself start small. Don't pressure yourself to be perfect and amazing and doing everything from the beginning, because this is a long road and incremental improvement is the goal. Big, sweeping, crazy improvements is not realistic. So my biggest message, and we'll use this as my convenient plug for my podcast. My podcast is called Sustainable Events Dog Walk. I literally record while I walk my dog. You don't have to walk a dog in order to listen. They are
Does the
under 10
dog
minutes.
contribute to the topics?
Yeah. Usually by trying to roll in the leaves. That's her biggest contribution usually. But she does leave messages for the dogs in the neighborhood with her little pee, and I think that it must be about sustainability also. And so they're under 10 minutes. And so it's one little thought, one little thing that you can mull over in my podcast in order to start thinking about how you can do a little bit better. We're going progress over perfection. Just a little. My favorite catchphrase since I was a kid is better is better. If you can do better by 0.5%, that's still better than zero. Better is better. So just little tiny bits at a time, try to do better, try to have more conversations, because this is all about like gaining the group together and getting us moving as a united front. So whatever the thing is that you care about, start there, because you'll have the energy, and just do a little bit at a time rather than feeling like you have to single-handedly solve the problem. It's all about using that leadership and using that forward momentum. So that's my big, when you go to sleep tonight, think about how you can just do a little bit better, and how you are a leader in the community and what you do will have an impact, even if it's little.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing your mantra. Better is better. I love it.
Better is better.
For listeners who want to connect and learn more about your work, and where do they find the podcast? Where can they find you?
The podcast is available everywhere. Sustainable Events Dog Walk. I also stream it onto YouTube so you can see what Rini looks like at the end of my leash. And find me on LinkedIn or AlyciaDrube.com for access to all of the podcasts. I'm working on getting my transcripts up there as well. And if you're really feeling fun, you can find me on Instagram. It's Alycia M. Drube. And that I'm still doing a combo of my personal and professional. So you'll be simultaneously seeing on-site photos and dog photos and whatever random thing from my neighborhood. So yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Alycia, for inspiring us to make sustainability a core part of our event strategies and start where you are, and also make sure that you give yourself a pat on the back. You're doing good. You're doing well, and keep going. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning into the Events Demystified podcast. I think when it comes to sustainability, this entire podcast episode was about, is a journey. It's not going to be a destination. So start small, as Alycia said, with maybe a single actionable goal. Whatever it is that you're passionate about, then focus on that, whether that could be water conservation, we'll touch on that in the beginning, reducing waste, sourcing locally, measuring energy use, whatever it is. And then lean on the expertise of the partners and vendors that you work with, and build partnerships with local suppliers and vendors that can really actually educate you and your team to foster that type of collaboration that can then support your sustainability practices. And then celebrate wins, right? That's a big one, no matter how small. In order to maintain momentum and inspire others, you have to celebrate your wins at every stage. And that's something that I've learned personally myself, especially through my body journey, because for the longest time, I would just start and do something and then forget to actually stop, pause, look back, celebrate, and then move forward. I would just go to the next thing. And especially talking about bodybuilding, you have to celebrate those wins, because the work is hard and it's like day in and day out. And if you don't look back a month or two to see, even within that time, how far you've come, you're gonna lose heart. You're gonna realize that in the big scope of things, like, it's a lot of hard work and I still don't see anything, because you see yourself in the mirror every day and you don't see your progress. But then if you look back at the picture that you took 2 months ago, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, that's when you see, oh, but wait a second, now I see it. So make sure that you stop, you celebrate the wins, as Alycia said, and focus on the progress over perfection, right? Yes, that's what you said,
Yep,
Alycia.
that's it.
Better
Progress
is
over
better.
perfection. Better is better. That one's so much easier to say.
I like that. I like that. And then connect with Alycia. Make sure that you tune into her podcast and learn more actionable insights and ways in which you can contribute to your sustainability practices and intentions. And then with that, if you did enjoy today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe, rate, leave a review. Your feedback really helps us continue to bring those valuable conversations to the events community. And until next time, well, let's keep reducing our impact and creating unforgettable, eco-friendly event experiences. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Events Demystified podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with other professionals like yourself. If you're interested in learning more about TreeFan events, including our future AI education talks and workshops, or to see how we can support your next event, book a free 20-minute consultation through the link in the episode notes. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and social media for updates on future episodes, industry insights, AI news and tips, and more. And if you have any topics you'd like us to cover, feel free to reach out.